What's up, YouTube? This is Politically Incorrect. All right, so I want to go ahead and give a nod to LB because he's the first one that I saw report this. Not that any tears will be shed, but uh, former United States Senator, former Senate Majority Leader, and the 1996 Republican presidential nominee, Bob Dole, uh, died overnight in his sleep at the age of 98. He had been battling lung cancer. I think it was earlier this year when he announced that he had stage 4 lung cancer. At the time, I was thinking to myself, man, that might be a death sentence. You know, um, he did not go through chemotherapy, but I think he used the same therapy that Jimmy Carter used. I think it's called immunotherapy. The difference is Jimmy Carter, even though he was old himself, was in better health, and I think his cancer was caught much earlier. Uh, but anyway, I believe at the time of Bob Dole's death, he was the oldest living uh, former representative, United States representative. So it wasn't that long a reign because the guy that died before him that was even older, I think that was maybe just 2 months ago. Um, but anyway, Bob Dole had been in bad health for a while, man. You could see that he was deteriorating over the last 10 years. His mobility was decreasing. Then it got to the point where he was confined to a wheelchair. I remember during the funeral of George H.W. Bush, Bob Dole had to be assisted out of the wheelchair, held up to salute. He saluted Bush's coffin and then went back down. So I was like, yeah, he was in failing health. And over the years, last 20 years, he's had a lot of different health scares. He had an abdominal aortic aneurysm that was caught and repaired some 20 years ago. That's the same ailment that killed actor George C. Scott. He had some type of surgery that had a complication with bleeding on the brain a couple of years after that, and had some other issues with infections and things of that nature. So he's had a lot of health issues over the last 10, 15 and 20 years anyway. Um, I also remember him. Well, I'll get to that later on. But anyway, Bob Dole was born in Russell, Kansas back in 1923. And uh, the life altering event that he endured happened during World War II when he was injured by, I think it was a grenade that caused extensive damage to his back and to his arms. Um, I think Bob Dole said that for a while he thought that his arms had been blown off. He couldn't feel them. He was paralyzed. Uh, his army comrades saw the extent of the injuries and gave him a huge amount of morphine for the pain. And then in Bob Dole's own blood, wrote the letter M on his head to indicate to anybody that would come upon him, because they had to still go do what they had to do. They were fighting on the front lines. If anybody else came and saw him, they wrote the letter M on his head in his own blood to indicate that he's already been given morphine. So when Bob Dole was hospitalized at a military hospital, I believe it was, he almost died. They thought that he was going to die. He had a raging infection. He had a 109-degree fever, extensive injuries, but he pulled through. It was a very, very slow process. He went through various surgeries and then months, actually a year and a half, I think, of physical therapy to the point where he regained his mobility in great detail, but he never fully recovered. His right arm was pretty much completely immobilized. His left arm had use, but it was numbness and somewhat limited use. He had to learn how to write left-handed because he was naturally right-handed, but he couldn't use it because he couldn't write. And what we would what we would see uh, when he appeared in public to kind of hide the injury, he would usually have a pen in his hand to hide the injury. Also, I think he did that to indicate to people that there was some issue with that hand, um, that arm anyway. But anyway, after the war, he went back to Kansas and opened up a practice. And eventually, he went into politics, ran for local office. Then he ran for the United States Senate, won, and then ultimately he ran for United States. He ran for the House, excuse me, won, and then ran for United States Senate and won in the late '60s. But he rose in the ranks rapidly and within the Republican Party. Part of that, I think, had to do with the fact that he was from the West or the prairie areas, which was becoming a growing area of strength for the Republican Party as the party was beginning to lurch to the right. He was also a protege of Richard Nixon, so that would help you, being that Richard Nixon was the president of the United States at that time. Uh, but during the 1974 election, he was one of the few successful Republicans to run for re-election during an election because of the post-Watergate carryover effect. Many Republicans were swept out of office. Bob Dole was able to hang on to office. Um, in 1976, President Ford, who of course succeeded Richard Nixon as president, Ford, who had been through a contentious and very, very close, hotly contested primary against Ronald Reagan, barely beat him at the convention, recognized that the party was moving to the right. Ford was a moderate. He had to drop Nelson Rockefeller. Nelson Rockefeller was the appointed vice president via the 25th Amendment after Watergate, after Gerald Ford assumed the presidency. Nelson Rockefeller was a liberal. He knew that to appease the conservative wing of the party, he had to nominate a conservative. Therefore, he nominated Bob Dole, who was approved. Bob Dole was 1976 vice presidential nominee. Bob Dole committed an infamous gaffe in his one and only vice presidential debate with Walter Mondale, who also, of course, passed away this year at the age of 93, when he referred to the wars in this, in the history of this country, he called them democratic wars, and said that the amount of people that have died in these democratic wars amount to 1.6 million, which is approximately the population of Detroit. And it was kind of a stupid, emotionless, you know, when you say democratic wars, it sort of insinuated that it was partisan. It was like a partisan angle toward wars. I don't know. It is what it is. But I think that remark hurt Bob Dole. Well, more or less hurt Ford because he was at the top of the ticket, and Ford narrowly lost to Carter in that election. But Bob Dole would go on and rise in the ranks, and he would ultimately serve various terms as a top-ranking Republican, ultimately reaching Senate Majority Leader various times throughout his political career. Now, he ran for president, if I'm not mistaken, in 1980. That wasn't very successful. He ran again in 1988, and initially he did very well. Um, I believe Bob Dole. I'm kind of getting a little fuzzy here, but I think he either won or was on the verge of winning in New Hampshire, and then the Bush campaign went negative on him, and then there was that contentious uh, interaction between then Vice President Bush and Bob Dole when Dole told him to quit lying about my record. Uh, but ultimately they became friends. But during the heat of the battle of that campaign, they really grew to dislike each other. But ultimately they became friends. But anyway, 1996 is what Bob Dole is probably most remembered for, and that is that he was the nominee for president of the United States at the time. He was 73 years old. At the time, he was the oldest nominee for a major party ever. And had he been elected, he'd have been the oldest president in American history. And unfortunately, if you're a Republican at the time, he was running against Bill Clinton, who I hated. Um, but at the time, the economy was doing very well. Bill Clinton did a masterful job appearing to be a moderate to slightly conservative Democrat. He came across as a fiscal conservative. He was doing everything he could to appease to moderate voters or slightly right of center voters. And Bob Dole was kind of doomed from the start, man. Bob Dole, um, that's the first campaign that I really followed in its entirety. I remember 1992, but I really followed 1996 when I was in high school. And I remember, watching Conan O'Brien, and he would have the screen with Robert Smigel with the mouth from Saturday Night Live, and it would be a picture of Bob Dole with Robert Smigel, and he was doing this terrible Bob Dole impression, with Bob Dole talking in the third person, Bob Dole, and I remember Norm Macdonald, who also passed away this year. Ironic that Norm, who was in his 30s, would be outlived by Bob Dole, but anyway, the press was very relentlessly negative on Bob Dole. Then there was this incident that happened. I think it was in California. There's this picture I'm using right here when Bob Dole fell off the stage, and it was just a microcosm of the campaign, man. It just, you know, Bill Clinton at that time was a rock star, and nobody was going to beat him. And on election day, he beat the shit out of Bob Dole. He won by like 9 points in the popular vote. Electoral vote 379 to 159. Had uh, Bill Clinton really wanted to, he could have pushed up the margin of the victory. But I think in the last month, the Democrats were trying to focus more on uh, trying to make gains in the House and Senate, so more money went to Senate and congressional candidates, and not so much for the Clinton campaign because they figured they had it in the bag. So Clinton didn't win by the margin that the polls were suggesting, but still, it wasn't close at all. So afterwards, Bob Dole retired because he had retired from the Senate when he ran for president, so he was retired. I remember he was in a couple of commercials for Pepsi. He endorsed Viagra. He became a little bit of a pop culture figure for a while. But that's all I remember about Bob Dole. You know what I'm saying? He's a Republican, so I'm not going to shed a tear about him. But there have been worse Republicans. There have been more racist. So as a Republican goes, he's a Republican, but he wasn't the worst one I've ever seen. You know what I'm saying? There've been some who were just absolute, just scum of the earth Republicans. Uh, he's more of a run of the mill racist Republican. It is what it is. But tell me what you guys think or don't think about Bob Dole. And Bob Dole, Bill Clinton, think he can steal this away from me, but Bob Dole's got momentum. Bob Dole's going to come back like a hurricane. Bob Dole's going to come back like a tornado on the undercurrent. Make it go back around. Bob Dole has got momentum. The big mo.